Hi everyone, welcome to the weekly fall seminar series of CASI, Center for the Advanced Study of India, University of Pennsylvania. I am Naveen Bharathi, a postdoctoral fellow at CASI, and I will be moderating this session. This semester also, all our seminars will be held online. While we might take some time to fully switch to in-person series, online series have helped us to host speakers from various parts of the world, which would have been impossible if the series were held in person. We also have been able to reach a wider audience due to this. Like students from India and elsewhere also have been attending this series. In this series, we have speakers who will speak on various topics ranging from forest rights to COVID crisis in India. Please visit our website at kasi.sas.upenn.edu for a complete list of speakers and registration links. Registration is required for our seminars. Most of our seminars are scheduled on Thursdays between 12 noon to 1 p.m., except one on November 17th, which will be on a Wednesday. Also, check out our website to know more about the activities of CASI, our fortnightly research publication, India and Transition, which covers research on contemporary India. And you can also subscribe to receive our weekly newsletter and also India and Transition in your mailbox. Today, we have Professor Suryakant Wagmore from IIT Bombay as our inaugural speaker. Professor Suryakant Wagmore is a public sociologist, academic, and writer. He's also a professor of sociology at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Bombay. He earned his PhD in sociology as a Commonwealth Scholar from University of Edinburgh in 2011. He's also author of many books. He's written a book, Civility Against Caste, in which he studied Dalit movements in Maharashtra, highlighting the centrality of caste in constructing localized forms and processes of civil society. This book reopened the debate on the nature and forms of Dalit assertion in the 1990s. He's also co-edited another book called Civility in Crisis, which examined the relationship between civility, citizenship, and democracy. He has published papers in many peer-reviewed journals and written many articles in popular press, showing the relevance of his research. Before joining IIT, Professor Wagmore was professor and chairperson at TIS, at the Center of Social Justice and Governance at TIS. He has held visiting affiliations at School of Development and Policy, Fudan University, Center for South Asia at Stanford University, and at SEMIS, University of Göttingen. He has been recently awarded the New India Foundation Fellowship to work on his book tentatively titled Is a Post-Caste City Possible? In today's seminar, Professor Wagmore will present parts of his ongoing book, and in this, he explores the nature of urbanism that caste associations of pure and privileged seek to construct in the metropolis of Mumbai. He will speak for 30 minutes and Q&A will be for another 30 minutes. Please enter your questions in the question box there. And we look forward for a great seminar. Without much delay, I'll hand over the mic to Professor Wagmore. Thanks for accepting our invitation and taking time to present your work. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Naveen. Thanks, Tariq, Nafis. Thank you for having me. What I'll be doing today is speaking on this project on caste in cities, which primarily focused on Ahmedabad and Mumbai. I mean, I had a request, when I am close to 20 minutes, just kind of warn me so that I can start
Sure.
wrapping up here. So this paper will be about caste associations of the privileged and pure caste. And I'll also try to, towards the end, speak of some outcast associations of the ex-untouchable caste, and bring in insights from that bit as well. Since we are working within a 30-minute kind of framework, I would not squeeze in a lot of field material here. So to begin with, let me just give you this quote from one of our respondents. He is a Kashmiri Pandit. Just a second. Something's wrong. Yeah. So Mr. Ajay, 54, is an active member of the Kashmiri Pandit Association in Mumbai. He is also a Bollywood actor, author, and teacher, and therefore an important face, in the mainstream public life of Mumbai. In his interview, he shared his reflection on the role of caste and Kashmiri Pandit Association that he's part of in Mumbai. Mr. Ajay joined the KPA soon after coming to Mumbai in search of work in 1992. The organization was in an active phase then, as members were keen to mobilize and raise the issue of violence that affected Kashmiri Pandits in Kashmir. He shares, I came in 1992 and immediately became a member. We had a lot of emotion against what had happened in Kashmir. We used to meet and think of taking this up, the government, United Nations. And this was in my 40s. I realized that my heart wants to connect with its own people. Mr. A and his other relatives, who along with many others had left Kashmir in search of work outside, as there are not many opportunities in the state. Most of these included theater artists, actors, doctors, engineers, and businessmen. Though A emphasized his love for motherland and culture could be recovered through his membership with this association, he also emphasizes this need to be mobile, right? And what we see in his narrative is also a need to belong in the sense and with its own people, that's the Kashmiri Pandit identity, but also a need to construct oneself through the golden age, or what he called as the old period, which was great, right? So I'll just quickly quote that bit to raise questions that I want to. Right? The olden period of caste, he says, was done, I think, very scientifically. It got polluted later. Original division of caste was very scientific. And then he's sharing this with my research assistant here. What he's saying is, have you not interacted with people who are unclean? Have you not interacted with your friends who are not very hygienic, who are very unhygienic? Like, it is because of genetic coding of a specific caste. It is because what we call sanskaras of a particular job. Because thinking becomes so. In terms of morality also, those who are chaste Brahmins, they are very highly moralistic. They have very high moral values. A Brahmin who is moralistic will never have an affair. You cannot be flirting around and dating around. This is not a real Brahmin. This is Vaishya Vritti, or a pure Shudra who doesn't believe in morality. So there were scientific reasons, because see, the kind of work which we do, if you have understood something about spiritual philosophy, right, castes and subcastes are kept separately. If you interact with someone who is used to, for instance, demanding bribes, it will have negative impact on you. Right. So what he understands the present urban space, as a space that is Kali Yuga and therefore not best for the kind of samskaras and values one could live and celebrate in an olden time, which old time, ancient also for him, which was very, very something to be preserved and celebrated. Right? Now, going by this, you may doubt, or one may have this question, whether Mr. A, Ajay, as I call him, pseudonym, lacks any, does he carry in him any possibilities of cosmopolitanism, given in the city of Mumbai, which is known for its cosmopolitan values and possibilities. So what is the nature? That I basically suggest that yes, there is possibility of cosmopolitanism, and I also argue that this is a form of Hindu cosmopolitanism which exists. But so what is the nature of this cosmopolitanism? How does one make sense of this cosmopolitanism? A critical view of cosmopolitanism in contemporary times could broadly understand it as an elitist, Western, bourgeois, and liberal project that provides moral and political meaning to lives of present-day privileged elites who can cross national boundaries across the East and West with ease. In this movement of mobility, enhanced by the advance of capitalism and the mobile global citizen learns and unlearns culture and politics across time and space. Truly global and cosmopolitan citizen thus lacks rigid local roots. However, despite increased mobility across classes and national boundaries, such political and cultural life is limited to a few. Cosmopolitanism, however, has deeper roots with moral meanings and implications. For Stoic philosophers, the lack of reason amongst humans was tantamount to slavery, and the use of reason alone would lead us into being citizens of the world. Neither status nor states could impinge on our natural inclination towards cosmopolitanism. Besides a certain spontaneity of reason, the Stoic philosophers counterposed a challenge of civility as universal to the particular nature of city-states. Cosmopolitanism found deeper humanist and liberal roots in the Kantian project of perpetual peace. Although it was far less dialogical and more prescriptive, cosmopolitanism should not only be traced in Western history and philosophy. However, and cosmopolitanism must also be considered in plural cosmopolitanisms to acknowledge the plurality of modes and histories not necessarily shared in degree or concept. For socialist writers likewise, cosmopolitanism was linked to the bourgeoisie and Enlightenment ideas of humanism. Cosmopolitanism therefore had to be brought down from the high horse of Western liberal imperialism to look into its multiple meanings, leading to discoveries of cosmopolitanisms in unlikely times and places. One natural place to look for cosmopolitanism is in cities and urban spaces as sites of openness and accommodation, where the coexistence of varied cultures, races, and classes was both possible and necessary. How did cosmopolitanism configure and consolidate in cities of the non-Western world? A major drawback of writings on cosmopolitanism and urbanism in India has been their inability to bring together sociological and post-colonial insights. Hence, these questions have remained unaddressed. This is best reflected in the way caste is approached or even sometimes ignored in the study of cities and urban cosmopolitanism. I draw here on Hall, Calhoun, Pollock, and Chatterjee to desist the top-down models of studying and understanding cosmopolitanism as an extension of liberal ideas of global citizenship. I contribute to the diverse version of cosmopolitanisms that is soaked in local ethics, politics, and urbanisms of the East. So how does urban cosmopolitanism work in India? Right? So rural life in India is deeply segmented and simultaneously regulated through intra and intercaste intimacy. Due to the ethics and regulations of the caste hierarchy, villages make a contra site for the possibilities of cosmopolitanism and genuine civility. On the other hand, cities as prime movers of modernity are considered favorable spaces for dissolving status-based identities and hierarchies so that they achieve a larger public based on spontaneity, dialogue, and openness. Historically, urban spaces also advance individual liberty and an associational culture conducive to civil society. Due to the dynamic density, urban spaces are said to produce organic solidarity, taking individuals beyond the solidarities of kinship ties. City life could thus be seen as an ideal space for practicing the ethics of alterity based on the centrality of free-flowing dialogue rather than guided by instrumental reasoning central to modernity or communal bonds tied to traditionalism, thus producing a sociability through spontaneity and impulse, which is artistic, free, flowing, and based on pure humanity. Perhaps for this reason, Dr. Ambedkar called for ex-untouchables to leave the villages for the cities, because caste was a deep challenge to the possibilities of cosmopolitanism and civility in rural life. For subalterns, cities constitute spaces of emancipation from the tyranny of rural social order. Urban margins could also construct subaltern cosmopolitanism as politics from below. Contra Durkheim, however, caste helps form organic solidarity where the cult of the individual is not void of the collective conscience of caste in contemporary cities. Further, cities have turned out to be mixed blessing for deprived groups because they may constitute sites of social emancipation yet coupled with economic hardships. To explore the multiple meanings and possibilities of urban cosmopolitanism, we may need to look for cosmopolitanism beyond the compulsions and hard lives of poor and excluded populations. Because there is this urge, and a lot of studies have done that, to look at margins, localities of poor, their politics, and work out an understanding of cosmopolitanism from below. Now, what I suggest is that this, in one way, is a limited understanding of cosmopolitanism. My work, therefore, examines the meaning of city spaces for communities considered higher and pure in contemporary times. I explore this through caste associations of pure and privileged to understand how they negotiate cosmopolitan urbanism. Are these caste associations anti-cosmopolitanism, anti-cosmopolitan, or do they promote a different kind of cosmopolitanism? Bombay or Mumbai evokes the romance of cosmopolitanism due to its specific and spectacular commercial development and impressive diversity stemming from colonial and post-colonial times. A rupture is said to have occurred in 1992 when cosmopolitanism of Mumbai was said to have been undermined by the communal violence following demolition of Babri Masjid. Such approaches, however, underplay the role of caste in Mumbai's social and associational life, and may not even realize that cosmopolitanism had been long compromised in the landscapes of Bombay. It is here that we need to bring together critical post-colonial insights and sociological understanding of caste and urbanization to grasp the rooted nature of urban cosmopolitanisms in India. Caste in its plasticity took the form of guilds and trade unions with the process of urbanization and industrialization. Caste in Bombay thrived under the British as the colonial government maintained its policy of non-interference in indigenous religion. Bombay saw the reorientation of primordial groups, caste and religious sects, as a response to ideological and political changes, and a new form of urban leadership emerged that had primordial linkages. Caste groups who had better jobs used ties of caste and kinship to fill future job openings and solidify their group's position. In some ways, this even continues now. The flip side of this is that caste also influences economic inequality and exclusion from labor markets. Caste has also historically shaped the organization of residential spaces, especially at the village level, and it appears to continue to do so in contemporary urban India. In a recent study, Coffey et al. Speak of explicit prejudice, but does the presence of caste in cities necessarily mean the end of urban cosmopolitanism? Could the presence of caste as community also point to traditional urbanism and structural continuity between the rural and the urban? Does caste as community also provide a social and moral base for urban life force and cosmopolitanism in India? The intimate nature of caste sociality or regulation in rural spaces is difficult to find in urban areas, but urban India is not uncongenial to caste, and caste constitutes a link between city and countryside. Caste interactions in the city, however, increasingly emphasize difference and the separation instead of hierarchy. Is such emphasis on separation and difference anti-cosmopolitan? Or could this also point to the making of a non-Western ideal of Hindu cosmopolitanism based on social closure and limited alterity? So this idea of Hindu cosmopolitanism that I work on. Now, cosmopolitanism may be a necessity of capitalist life, but its form may be varied. In its liberal form, cosmopolitanism emphasizes individual over community. Such cosmopolitanism also undermines the continuing imperial basis of liberal cosmopolitanism. In India, the laws of the state have limited jurisdiction and are more often subordinated to the rules of the right conduct prescribed by community practices. Chatterjee's doubts about cosmopolitanism and its liberal ills echo Hall's problems with cosmopolitanism and its implicit faith in liberal civil nationalism. For Hall, civic nationalism cannot proceed without cultural embeddedness, and identity cannot be constructed in relation to political systems alone. Thus, neither liberal universalism nor segmented communities can possibly exist in a vacuum. A combination of equality and difference is central to understanding existential, not logical, political positions for Hall. The crucial position, therefore, is to understand if the framework of difference and equality enables society to enhance its life chances for Hall. A similar cue is provided by Calhoun, who reflects on the nature of cosmopolitanism and its implications for cosmopolitan democracy. Tourism, music, literature, and clothes are all easy faces of consumerist cosmopolitanism. Soft cosmopolitanism can well be an elite project with emphasis on the individual and capital, but it may not lead to cosmopolitan democracy, right? So this is a kind of warning that Calhoun is giving us. Cosmopolitan democracy depends on finding ways to relate diverse solidarities to each other rather than trying to overcome them. Cosmopolitan democracy for Calhoun, thus, is not exactly, sorry. Naveen, how much time do we have? 15 more minutes.
Another 15 more minutes.
Yeah. So I'll get to the field details now. So Calhoun, however, therefore makes case for dialogue across communities, right, in an agnostic form to achieve cosmopolitan democracy, and thus is closer to those who emphasize alterity in everyday forms of sociality. Alterity enables experiencing oneself through unhindered encounters with the other. The individualism of modernity, on the other hand, produces a utilitarian individual who is guided by instrumental interests, thus affecting the possibilities of genuine dialogue. Alterity lies, therefore, in between the individual and the community, and we need to look for possibilities of an ontology based on dialogue, right, to achieve this, dialogical community. So, if caste plays the role of community in cities, how does this dynamic of collective peaceful living via community identities translate into social and political practice of cosmopolitan urbanism in contemporary times? Would it be similar to civility of indifference suggested by Bailey? Could it also result in some form of pragmatic indifference towards others and proximity to those closer in status, purity, honor, and culture? Would such forms of civility not be part of urban cosmopolitanism? McFarlane helps us further transcend the definitions of liberal cosmopolitanism that present it as only inclusive. Right? So I quote, all forms of cosmopolitanism are to varying extents inclusive or exclusive, implying that one important role for the critic is to illuminate the politics, limits, and exclusions of different forms of cosmopolitan imaginary and practice. While Pollock et al. View cosmopolitanisms in plural as cosmopolitanisms, a grounded understanding of cosmopolitanism will also require us to accommodate specific attitudes towards difference, including those that may seem anti-cosmopolitan from a liberal point of view. Chatterjee rightly suggests that there is a certain anti-political impulse in the political reminiscence of Appaiah, therefore. Accommodating non-inclusive cosmopolitanism also paves way for a critical study of cosmopolitan enclaves and their roles in constituting pragmatic urbanity. So I'll skip some bit of this discussion here, but so what does cosmopolitanism based on caste difference and closure enhance the life chances of Hindus and others? If we are thinking of Hindu cosmopolitanism, and these are the questions, right? So what I do here, instead of following the Western liberal ideas or this urge towards moving towards an universal idea of cosmopolitanism, I use here a broader canon of Hindu cosmopolitanism to understand and elaborate on the cosmos that caste associations of the pure and pluralist work towards. Hindu cosmopolitanism also helps us conceptualize a new ideal type of cosmopolitanism that is void of alterity. So through the study of caste decisions here, I argue that cosmopolitanism, while being a necessity of life in the metropolis, results from the compulsions as well as seductions that accompany life in megacity. The political and economic consequences of absolute segmentation are tremendous in modern times because they can freeze technical innovation and perpetuate the ritualized tyranny of cousins. This is Gellner, right? Caste as community is presented by caste associations as a social solidarity of choice and not birth to help individuals negotiate urbanism and indulge in consumerist soft cosmopolitanism. Some interventions by caste associations may seem anti-cosmopolitan because they mostly encourage horizontal alterity. I suggest, however, that cosmopolitanism should not necessarily be judged through parameters of inclusion alone, since some exclusion may well be part of Hindu cosmopolitanism that drives post-colonial urbanism in India. In the section that follows, I examine, so this study has looked at several caste associations, interviews with leaders, involves field observations, meetings, and some of the rituals, annual practices. So here I will present this one case and maybe rush through others. So what I'll do here is, look at this organization called the Deshastha Rigvedi Brahmin Sangha. Now, the Deshastha Rigvedi Brahmins are a caste mostly found in Maharashtra and Karnataka. It was a scribal caste in pre-colonial times that was mostly close to courts and kings, and they urbanized heavily in colonial times. Deshastha Brahmins are divided into two major groups, the Rigvedi Deshastha Brahmins and the Shukla Yajurvedi Brahmins. The Deshastha Rigvedi Brahmin Sangha was established in 1935, formed for Rigvedis living in the heart of colonial Bombay. DRBS, Deshastha Rigvedi Brahmin Sangha, I'll call it DRBS here onwards. The DRBS Vile Parle currently has over 1,000 members. It organizes events like Jayanti of Sri Ram, Khande Navami, Rigvedi Shravani, Independence Day, health camps with the Inner Wheel Club, and discussions with television stars from the community, and facilitates the community's public figures regularly. It also celebrates days of national importance like Republic Day and Independence Day. Its main source of funding is, of course, from the community hall in Vile Parle, which is rented out for social and private functions. The DRBS is also open to other Brahmins and the enrollment of non-Deshastha Brahmins as well-wishers. Right? So other Brahmins can join as well-wishers, but they cannot lead the organization, although they are discouraged from holding official positions. Members of other Brahmin castes can also participate in annual Rigvedi Shravani, so that's the thread ceremony, organized by DRBS. Apart from Brahmins, the association engages with non-sectarian organizations like the Inner Wheel Club of Mumbai. Members of DRBS occasionally volunteered with this organization to visit tribal villages in Thane district. Some members who visited these villages shared their concerns about deprived and vulnerable status of tribals and the need to contribute voluntarily to such backward communities. What we see in the DRBS is a form of horizontal cosmopolitanism where the association, albeit in a limited form, allows other Brahmins to be members while demonstrating occasional concern about other marginalized groups as well. Although such concern may be limited and may seem like Rigvedi's self-aggrandizement, the element of limited sympathy outside one's own caste needs to be understood as a new form of sociality for privileged caste subjects. Participation of younger generation is, however, negligible in most of these programs. This does not mean that youth are casteless, but for them, caste is limited to family and personal space. Not all of them want to make their caste a public identity all the time or as a mode of collective identity. Also, lack of time is considered a major hurdle for youth to get involved or volunteer for DRBS. The elder members of DRBS had varied and complex reactions to changing nature of caste community in Mumbai and the resulting challenges for association. While a few saw the possible erasure of caste as a positive development, this process was also seen as fraught with the danger of annihilating the institution of family, culture, and ethical life in general. DRBS respondents did not emphasize ritual purity or their high caste status, unlike members of some other Brahmin caste that we interviewed for. The DRBS respondents did not emphasize ritual purity or their high caste status, unlike members of other Brahmin caste interviews for this study. Some even suggested that origins of caste lay in the Bhakti saint Jnaneshwar, known for his inclusive preaching and critique of caste. Senior members considered themselves part of progressive Brahmin associations, and Deshastas were seen as being progressive and open to mingling between castes compared to other castes. However, they simultaneously viewed caste as community and culture. This maps onto the idea of caste as difference and informed their struggle to retain their cultural difference in the context of Mumbai. Such difference could have elements of horizontal alterity extendable only to other Brahmins, however. The organization is primarily run by elderly over 60 years of age. These are members who volunteer to take up leadership and managerial tasks. Presently, all these are pseudonyms here. Presently, Dr. Kulkarni is the chairman of the association. He is retired principal of a management college. In a group discussion, Dr. Kulkarni and other members shared their concerns about declining interest of younger members in the affairs of the association. One of the members called DRBS an organization of senior citizens. Most of these elderly active members are retired or close to retirement. They felt that people are going to forget caste. But their feeling about such an erasure of caste were mixed. They were worried that the younger generations do not come to these associations. They viewed this problem as peculiar to the metropolis of Mumbai, however, and not the problem in interior areas of Maharashtra like Pune, Sangli, and Satara. The challenges facing the Deshastha Rigvedis of Mumbai were seen to be peculiar but linked to the general decay of culture in cities. I quote from a focus group discussion here. So, Kulkarni says, see, compared to other Brahmins, Konkanastha Brahmins are close communities, right? And are more likely to marry within and think of their caste first. Konkanasthas look down upon Deshasthas. So other member shares, see, but we, in the sense Deshasthas, can accommodate you. For example, if you tend to take some non-veg, for us it is not binding. It will not be that we would separate you from this group, right? But they are very particular. They mean the Konkanastha. So there is this sense of Deshasthas being more progressive than the Konkanastha. The discussion continues, right? We are that way liberal, broad-minded, large-hearted, because we don't mind. We are not strict. Here we are saying that all Brahmins should come together. That is our feeling, basic feeling. Right? And the member adds, Marathas are very orthodox people. They feel they have ruled the state for so many years. So for 300 years, Shivaji Maharaj, other members, monks. So they believe that they are rulers and all the other communities are second rate. Right? So another member adds, comparatively, Brahmins are not orthodox. They are liberal. They marry Muslims also. So another member Dhotikar comes in. Earlier, you could say Brahmins were orthodox. Earlier thinking has gone. Brahmins are no longer orthodox. Another member adds, they are not orthodox. All in agreement, in not orthodox. Right? So there is this working of a new identity, right? Of the making of this new self that is beyond caste, right? And which is considered as a city self, a cosmopolitan in that sense. So amongst Brahmins, Konkanastha Brahmins were considered to be most conservative here. and closed in one sense. However, Brahmins overall were also seen to be more progressive, urban, and cosmopolitan than others, particularly in the case of Maharashtra, the Marathas. In other informal conversations, members of several upper caste associations saw this as a matter of compulsion and not choice, however. So, just to skip and come into some of the key quotes and understanding of this organization. For instance, the DRBS has had although there is recognition that movement beyond caste connotes cosmopolitanism and a progressive nature, such openness towards other castes is not necessarily considered good for moral and cultured living, which requires rootedness in caste. That forces of urbanization are seen as eroding. The DRBS, for instance, had a marriage mandal bureau which was closed down for 5 years ago. See now, there have been these changes. The marriage mandal was closed down and it has been, rejuvenated again. So what we see here is the interest of younger members is less. And there is also this anxiety about the younger generation marrying outside, especially the girls. So I share one of the quotes here. Mr. Desai, who is the Joint Secretary of DRBS, explained the peculiar problem facing Deshastas in marriage and how this was eroding the very bond that holds the community together. Right? I quote, "A peculiar problem facing Brahmin girls and more particularly Deshastha girls is that they are more educated than boys. They get good jobs. They don't get a good match within the caste and go outside the caste. Right? Girls have good salaries. They don't want to be dependent on husbands and follow men in the US, for instance. The girls in the Brahmin community want boys from within India. They do not want to go to USA and become a housewife. If they do not get boys from within the caste, they marry outside the community. Now, the problem of educated or economically independent young women choosing compatibility over caste in marriage was not mentioned by Deshastha Rigvedis alone. Education and the new individual intellectualism were seen as problem by most caste association members, especially privileged caste, and were recurring themes in other Brahmin associations too. Despite the progressive nature of Deshastas, Mr. Desai also felt that marriages outside caste point to the breakdown of family system and social cohesion in general. Although undesirable, he thought it was near impossible to regulate these new processes. The multiple choices in an urban material and cultural life was seen to create a life of compulsion in which it was not possible to fully regulate younger caste members, especially younger women. And I again quickly quote from a discussion here. So one member, Desai, goes on. See, just assume, he's saying, just assume, I am earning 75,000, my wife is earning 75,000 rupees, right? I have freedom of thought, my wife has freedom of thought. After 1.5 years, I don't like you, you don't like me, finish, get lost. He's referring to divorces here. The marriage system itself is breaking down in these times. The instances of divorce are more because of intercaste marriages. Earlier, the girl used to be in control of the parents. Now it is not like that. When a girl is outside the whole day, the parents have no control. Another member adds, in the city, nobody has time. In my larger work, I'm really working on this, the scarcity of time or the time famine to make sense of city. But it comes again and again in these interviews as well. The time famine and erasure of the caste self or the challenges posed to caste self, right? So in the city, nobody has time. I have no time to see where my son is going or my daughter is going. See, once you step down outside your house, another member adds, do you know whether the person who's sitting next to you is a Mahara or a Muslim? No Brahmin believes that I am upper caste. Those things have gone now. It is only the media that is propagating caste in a big way. Now, while these association members viewed Mumbai metropolis as a site of compulsion-induced cosmopolitanism in which Deshastas had turned progressive and liberal, Others saw the moral challenge and the looming risk of self-annihilation that accompanies progressive life in cities. Mr. Purandare, aged 52, is son of one of the founder members of DRPS. He held similar views on marriage and other individualist transgressions, but with a lot more clarity on ethics and culture. Such transgressions were seen as failure of sanskar. Mr. Purandare was critical of Western influence on youth, which went against a cultured way of life. His concerns
Rekha,
was, yeah,
we have 3-4 minutes more, and then we'll
we
take
have
Q&A.
3-4 minutes more.
5
Right.
minutes.
So, right. So let me just quote Purandare and end. Okay. So his concern was less animated by cosmopolitan patriotism, however, and more of an anxiety over the erasure of caste vis-a-vis the erasure of culture self in metropolis of Mumbai. The Brahmin culture self has to be recovered to challenge both the Western cultural hegemony that privileges the individual and constructs the possibility of Sudra-like transgressions amongst the Brahmins in cities. I quote Purandare. When do you marry outside? When you do not have sanskar, then you do not listen to your parents. You do not follow the guidelines. In a short period, they fall in love, start hanging together. Most have physical attraction, and because of this, they leave their own caste and go outside. Most of these love marriages result in divorce. Women are concerned that their figure, physical appearance, should not get spoiled, and that is why they don't want to have children. How serious is this? This is Rakshasa Pravritti, right? Evil nature. Since the Brahmins have started eating meat, the prices have gone up of meat. If you eat meat, your body reacts that way. You get thoughts of violent kind. Look at a Brahmin's face. You will not find negativity. But once you start eating meat, your way of being changes. You go on that track. You are cutting, killing, and eating. People who eat such things are aggressive. They are a threat to society. Caste self was not against modern or material life here, but against so end of quoting. Caste self was not against modern or material life here, but against erasure of self-identity. That caste as community helps build through marriage, food preference, and social closure around similar practices. The cultured way of being Brahmin, if resorted to in a classical way, could ensure that one stayed clear of evils of urbanism in Mumbai. Eating meat, unregulated love, sexual urges outside the caste, and other adventures that the sociability of city provided could best be mitigated through Brahmin sanskar. The DRBS, though a 70-year-old caste associations with no issue of funding or lack of economic resources, is struggling to stay relevant amongst its younger caste members. However, as I said, so this organization worked out newer ways to attract youth. So they were working on new designs to attract younger members by consulting other successful caste associations, organizing workshops on entrepreneurship, holding cultural festivals like Garba celebrations, and so on. So what I suggest here broadly, and let me conclude because there is no time, right? I'll take exactly 2 minutes, Naveen. Let me just get to them. So
Sure.
Caste as community, in other words, here seems to have provided the moral foundations for Hindu cosmopolitanism, even in colonial times, and continues to do so now. Would community or caste be less relevant for Hindu cosmopolitans in New York or other cities of North America? This question is broadly answered in negative in Chatterjee when he emphasizes community over individual as an Eastern ideal. And the virtual world offers more clues here. The Brahman Samaj of North America describes itself as the largest Brahman organization in America. Its sole objective is to bring Brahmins together. Likewise, for instance, there's a Nair Service Society in North America that hopes to enhance the social and cultural life of Nairs based on their traditional ways and values. Hindu cosmopolitanism and its civic engagement in cities across the world are largely filtered through caste. Urbanism in the megacity of Mumbai curtails the intimate nature of caste through consistent seductions and stimulations that challenge hierarchical ideas of caste. Caste associations of privileged and pure caste, while not challenging the caste hierarchy, simultaneously promote consumptive or soft cosmopolitanism. Through the caste associations that I talked about today, I have suggested that caste associations continue to influence association and sociability in their attempts to govern and discipline individuals, so that caste is their foremost commitment, moving them towards Hindu cosmopolitanism. That's, you are rooted in your caste, but continue to be cosmopolitan. Committed caste subjects who act as volunteers in caste associations are anxious about the rootless individualism of their youth, or the possibilities of a dialogical community that could destroy cultured belonging in urban spaces. So while Hindu cosmopolitanism proposes an alternative universal urbanism that values distinction, social closure, material indulgence, and mobility, it is also identical to soft or consumptive cosmopolitanism, but proposes an alternative ethical and moral positioning that celebrates closure as resistance to Western and other local varieties of cosmopolitanisms. Hindu cosmopolitanism thus helps us develop a new ideal type of cosmopolitanism that is void of alterity. Broadly, as hierarchy becomes distinction and difference, and caste becomes community, caste associations continue to provide roots into their respective communities for free-flowing individuals through invoking community pride and history. Hindu cosmopolitanism does not mean lack of politeness, order, peace, or other elements that are essential for urban cosmopolitanism. Paradoxically, these coexist with elements of vulgarity which affect the possibilities of individual self-realization in the city by making individual look inwards to find morals and sympathy. Hindu cosmopolitanism in this sense lacks the virtue of civility and may produce an urban modernity void of alterity. It does, however, constitute an important and dominant form of cosmopolitanism in urban India. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thanks a lot, Suryakant, for such a fascinating talk. As someone who works on residential segregation in urban India, I've not done ethnographic study yet, but I find your study very informing. And I think I would use your study to really explain some of the residential segregation I see in Bangalore and many other cities. We have a few questions based on your presentation. So by Pratik Vijayvargiya, who is a doctoral student at JNU, he's asking, do caste associations play a significant role in mobilizing citizens for electoral politics in cosmopolitan urban areas, especially for financial support, such as in the case of Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi? For example, like how Vaishyas and Baniyas have to split their resources between BJP and Aam Aadmi Party, who both consider as Baniya parties. So how do you see this? How does this kind of mobilization by these caste associations have any scope and space for politics based on social justice? You can answer this and I'll go with the next question.
Yeah. Thanks, Vijay. Very, very important and interesting question. See, now when you ask these institutions formally, right, they will always say that we are apolitical, right? But invariably, members who are leaders have political affiliations. Sometimes members who have leader have divided political affiliations, but they do have political affiliations. Now, see, AAP and the case of Baniyas is a peculiar kind because see, Arvind Kejriwal also evokes this idea of being a Baniya, right? Occasionally, so caste decisions may move towards them, but you won't have that kind of caste decisions fully mobilizing money. So we, like I said, there was. Can you go to the slides and?
Yeah.
There is this another organization which we studied. Sorry. So along with the.
So which one do you want me to go?
Keep rolling. I think I'll just tell you when we get there after NIS. Now, for instance, yeah, here, for instance, Bhanushali, yeah. Now, what we see quite a few members amongst the Bhanushalis had, leanings towards BJP, right? But that does not mean that the organization is going to mobilize the money for electoral politics. So there are parallel worlds, so everyone has, like, multiple identities here, right? The caste association is it may invoke symbolism and culture in that sense, which works for BJP, even ideas for that matter, but they were not involved in mobilizing financial resources. So members maybe, but that would be another platform, right? So drawing parallels with the Kejriwal case may not work here, specifically. Right. So let me just give you a conceptual kind of working here, which can clarify. See, what I suggest is that the caste is the space almost of a family. For instance, the earlier Kashmiri Pandit that I quoted, right? It's like being in your own kind of people. So caste is family. If there are larger Hindu spaces, organizations, right? Now that is almost like the making of civil society. Right? Now you may say that this is a closed form of civil society, but it is. It's beyond your family, right? It's almost, I'm presenting like this Hegelian framework here. Right? Now, but you cannot mix this space that is beyond caste but religious with politics easily. So what you may have is that space may be divided again, right? Political associations, because the interviews we did, there was always, because caste is understood as a family space. Right? So to talk about division was something that was avoided, so though members had political affiliations, it was avoided in that sense.
Yeah, thanks. And we have another question by another doctoral student at Penn. So Indivar. So he's asking about how does this caste association, the politics in caste associations, or even the Hindu cosmopolitanism, enter the workings of other institutions or other spaces like bureaucracy, trade associations, professional associations, political parties, like how Pratik asked. So how does this transcend the caste associations to other spaces, and how does this spill over? Does it spill over, and how does it spill over?
See, now there is definitely these caste associations do have, within them the space of working economic kind of solidarity. So for instance, within the KPA, Kashmiri Pandit Associations, it was shared that, on WhatsApp groups, we try to circulate jobs that are there in our firms within our groups first, so that our boys and girls get those jobs first. But this is, again, what was interesting, for instance, some organizations also said that we have, again, this is, for instance, the NIRS or KPA for that matter, they said we have scholarships for needy students, but there are very few applicants who applied. There was no need in that sense, right? But there is definitely this informal networks which are used for circulation and hiring and all, which works. But if you look at in actual economic terms, there are other studies which have done this job earlier. On for instance, there is on caste cooperatives and housing, and how I forget this name. I have cited it in my paper. So how this caste cooperatives built housing around caste identities, right? And it's almost was since colonial times. So it does transcend, but caste decisions tend to be this more of a it has economic role, it has political role, but it's limited. This space is more socio-cultural in that sense, right? It's more about, as I said, keeping the individual rooted in caste. Right? And quite a few members would say, for instance, in interviews with Nair Association, it came in other interviews also that for instance, if someone is dead in the family, right, you have to do the rituals that are caste specific, right? and therefore your birth and your death all are in one sense caste bound, right? And that keeps you rooted. So that was the kind of space that caste institutions provide.
So I'll pose another question, a quick question from Nafiz, my colleague. So he's asking, how does caste and provincialism intersect in this type of associations? Like, for example, like, can there be a Kannada association, but also a Brahmin association? How do they intersect? Do they come together in few occasions and they don't? So
Yeah, excellent. So Naveen, can you also move on to the next slide? I'll
yeah, I'll do that. So
yeah. And so when we go to the Telugu Madiga Association, yeah. So Nafis, thanks, very important and interesting question. So one of the organizations that we studied, So one of the organizations that we studied was an Nair association in New Bombay. Now, this organization within last 12 years or more years has moved from like 50 members to close to 500 members in New Bombay. Now, what was interesting is that before this organization functioned, there was a Kerala association, then a association of Keralites. It's almost as if the Nair association came as a reaction to the association of Kerala state. So now the Nairs have multiple membership here, right? They are members of the Kerala association, but like I said, the Nair association occupies this more intimate space. So one is not Keralite, right? But one is this association at least try to make the Nair personhood as the primary identity, right? That's an attempt. But this attempt is marred with a lot of challenges. It's not something that is easy and achieved, and which I described in my work. Right? So yes, the other case that I have here is this Telugu Madiga Mahasa. Now, the Madigas would be the ex-untouchable caste. So when the question was asked, right? So why have caste association in a city? One would like to be caste free. So we look at the last quote here, right? We have been trying to mingle, but people have always kept us outside. Right? So there are multiple reasons, right? People, the privileged groups may form closure to to make caste at least constructed as a central identity, whereas for the outcasts, the attempts of becoming part of the provincial identities or other identities may not work, right? So that's why they what this respondent is saying is they'll get us to do all the work but ask us to leave once they know our caste. So it works in multiple ways. So it's not that there are no provincial identities in the city which are regional, but they are not as important. Meaning members may have multiple identities, both provincial and caste, but for the caste associations, the primary identity somehow has to be, because that's the context. The city is somehow, almost creating this fractured individual with no roots, no sense of self, and there is no self without caste, right? So the caste associations try to keep the individual rooted. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, caste. Yeah, I get what you meant. So the other question, we have many questions. Like I'll ask, Christian is asking about like Patte Bapurao, about the Deshist Brahmin who made claims of a kind of social liberalism and cosmopolitanism. So he's asking, do Deshist community Brahmin groups, do they remember Patte Bapurao or any such more heterodox figures? And if so, how is it? That's one question. I'll club 2-3 questions. And we also have another question by Nikhil, who is asking on how do non-upper caste associations approach questions of cosmopolitanism? And how does gender interpolate questions like how many women are part of, maybe a couple of other questions, how many women are part of these caste associations? That's another part.
Right.
So then we have Another question by Malini Ranganathan on like how do you have you studied any RWAs, resident welfare associations, and also are they based on
I missed
caste?
that.
Whether
Sorry, I missed that.
RWAs, resident welfare associations.
Welfare associations.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. What about like they? She's sort of telling that they mostly consist of Brahmins and dominant caste. Is there any? So it would seem RWAs, which are key to mode of a middle class activism, are caste associations, even if are they caste associations in a sense that are RWAs are also caste associations in a
Right.
sense.
Right.
Yeah, so there's these three questions. If I answer, we can take a couple of more questions and end the session.
Right.
And also, to be frank, actually, I also have a question in a sense that how does this, for example, in Bangalore, I have seen that there are a lot of caste-based housing cooperative societies, like Kanyaka Parameshwari Housing Society, but
Mhm.
essentially a caste society, but they also are into the business of selling plots to their caste members. So you can
Yeah. Yeah.
take all these questions together. Yeah.
The question that Christian asked about heterodox figures. Now, there is one aspect which I can, kind of speak generally for all caste associations of the pure and the privileged. At least this is what comes through our, perusal of kind of not just interviews, but you look at some of the caste associations have, had monthly publications and so on. If the figure who is from your caste is also a public figure and may have non-caste identities that make him public, such a person is celebrated invariably in caste associations. So I don't want to name specifics in the sense there was a very known singer who married outside caste, who has done all kind of uncast things from a Brahmin community, but there were letter exchanges between the heads of between the leaders of the associations and this singer, where she is celebrated within this, as someone who's done so well. So so the question you are asking here, Christian, so not that one has to emulate this radicalism. As I said, at least in the Deshastas, they would, for instance, speak of the saints who have talked of anti-caste sentiment, right? But does not mean that it has to be practiced. But what is to be appreciated was they were Deshastas. So it's a very complex kind of workings, right? So you own up to their, you make them part of family, celebrate that they are part of family, right? But if there are any anti-caste renderings, that is not to be really celebrated. Right? So it's in that sense which was happening. So and how does this work amongst non-upper castes? If we go again to the slides, I'll quickly give one good example which I have listed there of Kitte Bhandaris. This is an OBC caste.
Yeah, let me
Should
do the slides again.
be the third or fourth slide before the one that we have right now. We are showing.
Yeah, this one, right?
Yes, this one. Yeah. So now, if we have any scholars who worked on the non-Brahmin history, we cannot not know Rao Sahib Bole. Now, Rao Sahib Bole is the one who forms this Kitte Bhandari Samaj. Right? Now, we are well aware of his non-Brahmin activism, especially for education for the Bhandaris. Right? He's the one who is against the Brahmins writing history of Shivaji, because for him it's a biased version of history, right? He's the one who worked and mobilized extensively for education amongst non-Brahmins, particularly Kitte Bhandari. Now, if you look at Kitte Bhandari Association in present times, the next slide, sorry, Naveen. It has turned into an association which at best holds marriages, right? It rents out the hall, which was built through the earlier non-Brahmin movement and struggle. Right? People come here only for marriages. That also, if it does not work on the internet, right? Otherwise, they have regular cultural programs and pujas. So that whole the political nature of Kitte Bhandari identity, which may have existed in colonial times, it is not there anymore. Right? And this is across, for instance, Nayars were keen to, they were always saying, we are like Brahmins, okay with marrying Brahmins. Basically, this whole idea of, intercaste marriages upwards is always appreciated. Similarly, amongst Kitte Bhandaris also, that was something that was seen as all right. So what we see is, while the middle caste, there is this tend to be part of the mainstream. Next slide, Naveen, please. Amongst the, we go maybe a little, go down towards the outcast, associations of outcasts. What we see, on the other hand, amongst the association of outcasts is that so their idea of associations is not merely about closure, but they are forced into forming caste associations because of exclusions and so on and so forth. This is a rushed response, but it's there in some of these slides, and yeah, their way of approaching caste associations. If you look at the symbols also, there is Ambedkar in all of these outcast associations. Now, this is, for instance, Rohidas Sangh. This is a Charmakar organization started by one of Ambedkar's rival in those times. But the present-day members would speak in a very celebrity tone about Ambedkar. They would talk about, having intercaste marriages as something good, for instance. Yeah. So caste associations for them is both to think of a difficult and deprived past, but also to construct a hopeful future in that sense. So that's the nature of it. I hope I have answered your question. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. We have many questions. I think we will take a couple of more and end the question. So one question by Suruchi is also a doctoral student. So she's asking, how do caste associations help in getting citizenship rights are actualized through the city by different social groups, when at same time cities are also sites of xenophobic expressions?
This is slightly in the sense, is this in relation to Mumbai, or this is just a generic?
It's relationship to, let me read it again. So my question is regarding the politics of difference and how the vision of citizenship rights are actualized through the city by different social groups, when at the same time cities are also sites of xenophobic expressions.
Right now, I would not see Bombay or Mumbai has had episodes of large-scale violence against Muslims, but what we see is or what are called as communal riots, right? But they were just episodes. It's not something that is kind of written or performed regularly. So xenophobic may be maybe a stronger kind of concept or idea to use here. But what one sees in study of caste is that the Muslim is definitely the new other, and it is presented in various forms. So in fact, Naveen, you asked these questions on housing and caste associations, right?
Yeah.
Now, see, in Mumbai, you would not, though there are some studies which point to, ideas of vegetarianism influencing housing, but in Mumbai, you would not find housing being restricted because of caste or food habits. The closure is for Muslims. That's a clear kind of working. And the Bombay kind of advertisements you will rarely see in Mumbai. So it's all in one sense market driven. But if I'm to quickly answer this question on claiming citizenship, see, like I said, we have to understand caste associations and their particular form of role. It's not necessarily about politics. So, for instance, in ex-untouchable caste associations, you will see that there is a discourse of rights. You will see Ambedkar's image and all, but the work that they involve in is like it's mostly helping some family or organizing the annual events that all caste associations have, or at best, if there is politics or political, for instance, this Charmakar Sangh that I was talking about, they were very jubilant when and they shared when Mayawati became PM. Now Charmakars are in one sense they make this like Vijay said, right? The Baniyas mobilize money for Arvind Kejriwal. So the Charmakars see Mayawati as someone who is close to the community, right? But the role of caste associations is different. It has to be. It cannot. It does not do the work of claiming citizenship rights or so on. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Another question which a lot of people have asked is the question of gender. How many women participate in these caste associations? Do they have a major role to play in these associations? A quick answer would do.
Yeah, very much yes. Very much yes. So the caste is like family. I mean, there is no family without women in that sense. So caste associations are actively there are women who play leadership roles. There are women and there are also gendered roles which are played by women. So very much yes.
Yeah, another quick question which comes from my own experience in Bangalore. So state gives funds for a lot of these caste associations through when one of our chief ministers directly gave budgetary allocations to a lot of caste associations, like smaller caste associations. So what is the relationship between does state engage them more consciously for their own electoral gains, which I think the first question Pratik also asked, but this is a different, it's not they mobilizing money for them, but this historically been the case in Karnataka. Even during the Miller's Committee report, the funds were to the communities were dispersed to caste associations. Essentially, that's when in the 1920s you find a lot of caste associations coming up in Bangalore. So even today, they are used as a way to provide public goods for these communities to start hostels and all that. So does that happen in Mumbai too? Does state interact with these caste associations?
Right. Now, we'll have to really look at the details of Karnataka, but in Maharashtra, let me just quickly give you this example. For instance, Gaud, Saraswat Brahmins are a very powerful community. And there are a lot of resources they mobilize within their caste associations. Now, what was interesting and one of them was shared was, see, you cannot form, for instance, a hospital for one caste. Because that is not considered charitable. And in fact, if you have income of a particular caste association, it actually can be taxed. So what this caste associations do is, then if those caste associations that have resources, they form charitable trust hospitals and so on. So they take up a larger public form, right, where their resources are not taxed. And then the relationship with state changes. You may get land, but it's no more a caste association or caste hospital, right, for that matter. So what we see here is in Maharashtra, there are direct relations with, with caste. There is funding to caste, but that is done through corporations. For instance, in Maharashtra, there is something called the Annabhau Sate Development Corporation. Now that's meant for a certain caste, right? But there is no direct funding for caste associations. So that's not, and definitely not in cities. What we also have is, there are, for instance, there are two forms of engagement with state. Quickly, I'm rushing this. One is, for instance, the Kashmiri Pandit Association. Now they were given land for doing their office and so on, but that was more of the whole discourse of victimhood and Shiv Sena being close to the issue of Kashmiri Pandits and so on and so forth. But there are other associations which at times encroach upon some place illegally, build a temple and then make it a caste association kind of thing. So there is negotiation with state, but no, you don't see that funding kind of directly flowing to these associations.
Yeah, thanks for that answer. I think we have a lot of questions, but with the paucity of time, we won't be able to take a lot of questions. But please, you can write to him on his email ID and interact with him directly. Thanks a lot for making time, that too at this time of the hour in India. And with such a fascinating presentation. So next week, I will be presenting my work on urban residential segregation in Indian cities. You can register for the talk at our website. And thanks everyone for attending this fascinating talk. Thanks again, Suryakant, for making time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.